Alright, so let's talk a little bit about Mr. Edward Van Halen and kind of the secrets to his tone and what I do to replicate what I replicate, and then I'll go through some of the sounds. So first thing is, I'm going through a buffer, and it's a buffered loop at the very beginning, the Empress. So it buffers, so my signal is about a 15-foot chord from my guitar to there, and then the output to the pedals is actually buffered. It goes through all of those pedals and then comes back into another buffer before it leaves to go to the amp. So my signal is very clean. It's a good buffer. It's not, Boss has buffers and they're okay. I just think if you run too many of them, and I may want to take out the super octave at some point, and none of these other pedals have buffers. So buffers aren't bad, and you kind of need them somewhere in your signal. I also like having a box that I just plug right into. It kind of makes things easier to look. If there's a problem, I can always just unplug, that kind of thing. So I go into the wah pedal from the buffer, then the tuner, the super badass, the octave, the flanger phaser, the super L or SL, which is the exotic. It's like a super lead. You're supposed to be like that, and then back into the buffer and then to the amp. Okay, Ed signal by comparison, and what he does now is he goes to a wireless unit. He's got digital wireless units, those ones that cost like $1,500, $2,000 a piece. I think he's got 2 of them or 4 of them, backups and such. His signal goes to that, and then Dave Friedman, from what I understand, built him a special pedal or some kind of gizmo that changes his signal's impedance to send it out to the pedal board so that there's no signal loss and no noise added. So probably goes from like a regular guitar chord to an XLR, then out to the board. Then it changes back. He's got another box on his board to change it back. Goes through his looper. And in his looper, he has his wah, his flanger, his phaser, a chorus pedal, and I believe he does have a Boss super octave. There's a couple songs where he does kind of add in that low bass end, low end stuff on there. And then, so if his guitar signal, if he's not running his effects, he's going right through that looper and back into the head. And he may have a way to even bypass that whole system if he wants to. Knowing him, that he would have that option. He also has a special box that he can hit the button and it lowers the volume. So it's kind of like a volume pedal, but it's just a switch. So it lowers it about from 100% to about 25%, just like lowering the volume on your guitar. But he does that so that he can get that cleanup sound, and I'll show you exactly what I do. I do that trick with my pod too, where I lower the volume on my pod, it goes down to 25% and automatically gives you that clean sound for, like, the middle section of Ain't Talking About Love, stuff like that. So then it goes to my amp, which is of course the 5153 50 watt. I like to use the blue channel a lot, but I've been really liking the red channel. I just don't like to turn up the gain. My setting right now is about 7. I like a little extra gain, but normally I play on about 6 for the gain, 6, 4, 6 for my other settings, and then volume, around 1 or 2. I don't really go too loud on that. Close to same settings, mostly straight up really, and about 4 on the red channel. Presence is at about anywhere from 4 to 5, almost halfway up, and then my resonance on the back is all the way up. I go from the effects send out, and I go into a decimator, a flashback delay, the looper, and the reverb. The reason I have the ditto looper there is because I pretty much always have the reverb on. So I may want to do the loop without delay, and then when I solo or something over it, then I'll use the delay, but I pretty much always have the reverb on. So Ed Live doesn't use reverb. He uses a couple delays, and I know he uses some kind of a gate. He's used in the past, he's used a Rockman Smart Gate or a couple of Rockman Smart Gates. I know he uses something in there now. I don't know what it is, but he doesn't use the effects loop, or at least not the way that I would think he does. I think he uses the preamp out, and then that preamp out goes to his Korg. I think he has an SDE 3000, a PCM 70 for a little bit of chorusing, or he used to use the Eventides, to do the chorusing and different delays. But those delays are 100% delay, and they go back to 2 more amps. And so basically the sound that's coming out of, he's got 3 speaker setup. The middle speaker is that normal head sound with no effects. That's why he uses the preamp out and not the effects loop. So now, like I said, if you followed his signal change from the beginning, you go from his guitar to the wireless unit to his pedal board and back, and it doesn't go through the pedals if he doesn't have the loops on, into the head and into the cabinet. And that is one straight signal, Nothing interfering in it really, except for those pedals if he has them, and that is always there. Then he has 2 side speakers, and from the preamp out of the head goes into those delays, which are set up stereo. I think he runs 2 delay times, 390 and 400 seconds, and he probably has something, I'm not sure if those are specific to Cathedral when he plays that in the solo, but I know he has a special setting for that as well that he likes to use. So it's a 100% signal going to those delays, okay? And then those go to the side speakers. So he only has 312s going at any one time. So he's probably running that middle amp pretty hot, and then the side amps are, they're fairly loud. He can kind of set those where he wants. But if something goes wrong with his rack, he always has that signal. He can always plug into an amp. If something goes wrong, he can always find a way. That's like I said in a forum earlier. He used to have 3 guitar amp setups. He didn't always run his pedal board. People think that he always ran through the Phase 90 and the flanger, but he didn't always run through the pedal board. He would go straight into the amp. So if he broke a string, or a tube blew on his amp, or a speaker blew, he would just grab another guitar, flip off the standby on the amp, and he was ready to go and keep playing. And in the club days, back then, and probably, I know for probably the first few tours he did that too, because he was collecting Marshalls at that time. He had a Music Man head at one point back then, and way back in the old days, he had a fuse below at a gig. And after that, he always had backup amps, because he had to drive back to his house and get another fuse to fix the head. So I think at that point, that's what a professional does, and he is definitely a pro. Okay, he knows all the tricks. He's talked to a million people. He probably has his own ideas. Some may be right, some may be wrong, some are just opinions. So, but anyway, to get the most similar sound to him, I do different things, and his old sound is different from his new sound. But one of the keys is a reverb, and so to show you where I have my reverb set, plate, the effects level is just below 50%, the tone is just over 50%, and the decay at 50%. For my own personal tastes, I usually run the effects level, the decay, and the tone a little bit less, 10 to 15% less of where those are. But for Van Halen sound, that is what I like, and you'll hear it in a second. The other thing is the flashback. I have it set to the 2230 or 2290, whatever the TC sound is. Now what I have it set for is 0 feedback, a short delay slap time, and the effects level is about 40%, 45%. That is for the slapback that he uses on the first album. What he may have done, no way to know for sure, is he may have used the Echoplex from time to time as a slight boost to give him a little more distortion. So when you listen to Atomic Punk and you listen to Ain't Talking About Love, there's that slap delay that's in there through the whole song. The only time it's not in Ain't Talking About Love is during the middle section when he cleans up his guitar. And I think what he was doing was, that's the only setting where you could actually engage at the echo, and that's like an artifact sound that's in there. So it wasn't intended to be in there necessarily, but it gave him that extra boost, and he thought, oh, that sounds cool, so I'll live with it, kind of thing. It also could have been something that was added after the fact. I've tried different tape delays. I've tried replicating that sound, like in the pod and things, and nothing really works like a real Echoplex does. And that's why a lot of people have, for example, the EP booster. Now, on an old Marshall, you would need an EP booster. On the EVH amps, you don't need those. Or on the PV amps, you don't need those. If you want it there, again, it's not about right or wrong. I'm just talking about for Ed's sound. That's why he doesn't use any. He did use a super overdrive at some point on one of his tours, but he does not use overdrive pedals. He just doesn't need to. So let me go ahead and demonstrate some of the sounds and show you what this will look like, or what it looks like when I hit certain things, because certain songs have certain effects. Hopefully you'll be able to see my guitar and see the effects that I'm using. Hear the amount of reverb there? So, my phaser is set to script. It's not a pronounced phaser sound. He just doesn't use that. So when You Really Got Me, I usually set about 9 o'clock, maybe 10-ish. Try to play around with it and get the right sound. So let me hear the sound. You can hear it, wow, 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 and how it does that. Mine's set just a little bit past 9 o'clock. So what he uses it on a lot of songs, Running with the Devil on the solos, and also when he talk about love. And there he uses the toggle switch trick where the front pickup is off, so he's toggling and it does the on and off switch, or it's raised against the machine thing too. So the other thing is, like I said, the flashback delay with that slap. So when you do Ain't Talking About Love, so the flanger is only used to emphasize that one part. And then the guitar solo has the phaser. And he also has a sitar there, which doubled it over. So the other thing from the first album is Atomic Punk. Same thing. Flanger and the slap back on the flashback. Now the guitar solo and some of the other parts, there's the second little part. And then there's the solo, and before the solo is the flanger. Back to the phaser. So those are the definite things you need to know for that part of it. The other thing is, I wanted to say Mean Streets. So take off that. You're really going to hear the reverb sounds great on makes the sound on that song. And the last thing is Unchained. Again, only hitting the flanger for those parts you need. So, a lot of discussion. Phaser and flanger, do they go in the loop? Do they go in front? If you want to replicate Ed's sound, it's got to be in front. I don't think he ever used them in the effects loop, except for maybe on when there's a part where he uses a keyboard and it goes through through his Marshall, and the flanger could be in front, could be after. There is something that I know he uses the flanger a different setting, and he doesn't engage the Unchained setting, but I pretty much use that. I use that all the time for his stuff. I like to use it differently for other things, like for certain clean sounds that I might use it for. I don't have a chorus. I hate the sound of a chorus 99% of the time, so I'd rather use a phaser or a flanger when I'm going to try to create clean sounds. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'm going to demonstrate some of the other stuff on my pedal board soon. So again, if you're trying to get Eddie sound, this is probably one of the best ways to do it with a normal pedal board type setup. A lot of the stuff I've seen online is wrong. It's absolutely out of this world wrong. Or it's misleading because it will show stuff in a rack and it's all in these loops, but it doesn't show if the loops are before or after the amp kind of thing. And also, if you look at like 5150 and some of the later tours when he did use those, he wasn't even using a phase 90 because he wasn't playing any of those songs. And when he played, for example, You Really Got Me on Live Without a Net, he's not using a phaser on that solo. That's just the way it was. So anyway, hopefully you guys found this informative. And this is my opinion and my experience of seeing a lot of other people use rigs like this. Steve Morris uses a flashback and he sets it to 100% delay, and he uses it the same way Eddie would, where he has another amp that's his wet amp, and then he has the dry amp. So if something happens with his effects, they go down, wires out, he's always got that dry signal. He does the same thing. He's explained it, how he does it. He also, around the same time Ed had created his Frankenstein guitar, Steve Morris created his guitar and put the double pickups in it and stuff like that people weren't doing back then. He was doing a lot of the same stuff Eddie was. If you go back and look at interviews of him, and he's not, talking great about himself or anything like that. He's a very humble guy, but he was doing the same stuff. So hopefully, again, you guys enjoyed it, but please ask questions. I'll be glad to answer anything you have.